Hi, this is Curt and welcome to another edition of Fire Law Roundup.
Okay, let's go to this one.
We
am
got
going
to
to have
talk
a lot
about New
of
York. We
strong
got
words on it.
what was the legislature thinking?
Oh, I can tell you everything about this.
You know, this is not that I'm not trivializing the pain that people went through. Okay,
right.
But this is crazy. This is just crazy. But let's
so let me give the
facts.
brief facts and let's have this discussion, because New York Fire Department should know a lot about this. At our conference, we're going to speak specifically on protecting junior firefighters. But here's what happened. City of Rye, which is down by Westchester County, downstate New York, a fairly wealthy city in some ways, but a populated city, I guess. The city of Rye has agreed to pay $3.25 million. They're settling a sexual abuse lawsuit. Now, you would say, okay, no big deal. The lawsuit was filed in 2020, COVID time, right? But it took place in 1970 or the 70s.
The sexual assault took place in the 1970s.
Yeah, the sexual assault took place. Yeah. So and these aren't allegations, because someone pled guilty in 1972 to first-degree attempted sexual abuse and got a 5-year suspended sentence. Now, what is different is they pled guilty to attempted sexual abuse. That's very different than what's alleged here, which is actual abuse between 20 to 40 times. But they've got an admission to an attempt. That's all they need to win, right? So they took in 2020 lawsuit where the events happened in the early 70s, and they pay now. Now, that's just a example, and frankly, a not good example of why this is a really shitty law. So I've spoken about this, but let me tell you what happened. So back in 19 and 20, almost overnight, now you got to understand what was happening at the time, because this is when Eichner, what's his name? So there's the movie.
The
movie producer.
Epstein?
No, Epstein was the plane. He's also going on, right? Epstein is happening at the same time as Harvey Eisner. The movie producer.
Harvey Eisner from Firehouse.
Oh, no. Whoever the movie producer is, and that they have a movie on now, something like Say Nothing or something.
Let me get the proper name, and I'll go ahead.
Yeah, but it was the movie producer who was sued, sexually assaulted. I think he's now dead. Heavy set, ugly guy. But he was a big Hollywood movie producer. You can't miss it. In any event, those two things are happening in the 1920s. The Boy Scouts.
Weinstein. Weinstein.
Harvey Weinstein. Thank you. Jesus Christ.
I know, huh? It must be a weekend. It must be like jet lag for both of us on.
I totally feel it.
Yeah.
So what happens is, against this backdrop where there's all the sexual abuse, and this is before Cuomo was alleged to have, put his hands places where they shouldn't have been.
Yeah.
All of this is going on in New York. New York has been very as they should be, pro victims of domestic violence, pro victims of abuse. But what New York does is comes out and said, listen, even though something happened in 1970, I'm defending 13 cases that happened in 1960, allegedly, right? And here's why I'm furious about it. One, as a practical matter, there's no insurance to cover either the payment or, more importantly, the defense fees, because who's your insurance company in the 60s or 70s? And under every policy, you had to give them 90 days notice of a suit. Okay, well, this is 40 years, 50 years, 60 years later. We don't, right? So that's the first problem. There's no insurance. Your insurance company's off the hook. And look, the insurance wouldn't cover the payment, the settlement, or the loss at trial of a judgment, but they would normally pay the defense costs. I'm being paid out of pockets of all of my clients because the insurance company, they don't even know who it was at the time, assuming they're even in existence. That's problem number one with these laws. Problem number two, who's our witnesses? I have two or three cases against the fire company in Buffalo, and the witnesses are dead. The person who is the alleged assaulting individual, right, is dead, and there's no witnesses. So worse is, in the case of the Boy Scouts, which are hundreds of these Boy Scouts and churches, but the fire departments are wrapped up with the Boy Scouts because we were charter organizations. So the Boy Scout programs, or allowed the Boy Scouts to stay at the Firehouse, happened all over the state, which is why I have a lot of these. So here's the problem. There's a charter agreement. A charter agreement is when the fire department and the Boy Scouts get together and they say, here's your agreement, here's what you have to do. Those records are destroyed. So they've, one, long since been destroyed, and two, there was some fire or flood or something that destroyed most of these records. We don't even have the agreements showing the responsibilities of the fire departments. So my whole point is there's no documents other than one person's word with no witnesses. That's not the case here.
You could make the argument, I don't know, you probably have thought of this, is that it's a due process violation, that so much time has gone by that how can anyone be expected to prepare a defense for themselves? That's why we have a statute of limitations, and that this is creating such a burden on organizations. The perpetrators, they're not going after the perpetrators, they're going after the organizations whose leadership and membership and everything has changed. People today who've done nothing wrong now are having to pay for the sins of people 30, 40, 50 years ago.
Right. And that's, and you know, it's one thing when it's the church. It's an institution, whatever, maybe it's fair, maybe it's not fair. I don't know. My goggles are out for the fire department, but it is so hard to defend these. Now, fortunately, let me just tell you, so the period to file these suits closed, right? You could only file up till sometime a year and a half ago.
Oh, I didn't realize that. That's good news. That's good news. Even
on the website that you cite to, they've got it wrong as to how long you could file. The filing period ended. So for these long time ago things. So the good news is that period's cut off. But here's what's happened in at least in New York State. They've sued the church, they've sued the Boy Scouts, but they also suing the fire departments, right? As one of the primary culpable parties, because the fire department housed the Boy Scouts or the church, the fire department hired the liaison or the individual who allegedly abused people. But what they've done is they sued the wrong entity in all of these cases. So I have 5 motions to dismiss out to get rid of most of these cases. Now they're all stayed because they're in bankruptcy. So nothing's happened for years until the Boy Scouts resolve their bankruptcy issue. It stops everything. But in these cases, we've said you sued the wrong party. They've sued a fire district, but it was the company. They've sued a company, but it was the town who should have been liable. So fortunately, in their haste to sue everybody, including God, they've screwed up. But these laws are horribly unfair. They really are very unfair. Not having anything to do with the victims. You deserve your day in court, but against who? Yeah,
and one of the sort of underlying pseudoscientific parts of this whole thing is that whole repressed memory concern, that people can experience something, repress it for decades, and then all of a sudden it comes out. And that's been totally debunked. I mean, the validity of repressed memory has been debunked. And I sort of thought that this law might have been premised on that sort of misunderstanding about repressed memory, but that has been debunked, and we've discussed that in some of my classes that I've taken at Arizona State on forensic psychology. But there's our memories are not good, even about things that happened yesterday, even about, look at both of us trying to think of names and different things,
right?
You know what I mean? Trying to remember something happened 40, 50 years ago, and the way that our brains process things, they store them and then they try to retrieve them is
right.
It's kind of scary that we can find our way home every day. But
what was interesting, by the way, at the appellate argument I had, the cases before me, it was a criminal case, a murder. And they were arguing about the evidence. They had a hat with the victim's blood on it and the hair of the shooter and gunpowder on the hat, right? But they talked about the witnesses' statements. This was really interesting. And they said, and I'm sure this is a thing in criminal law, it's not my area, but the attorneys for the state, for the DA and all that, prosecutors said, the witnesses knew that this person who was ultimately killed, that his life was in trouble. And they used a phrase, they were on heightened awareness or had a heightened sensitivity to perceive things carefully at that moment. So because of their heightened awareness, where they knew that something could happen. They knew somebody was coming for this person who was ultimately killed. They were on the lookout. So I liked that argument. I'm sure there's a whole line of cases on the credibility of witnesses who have heightened awareness. You know, it's like saying, oh my God, the car's about to run the light. You stare at it and the car runs the light and you're like, okay, I was told to look for it. I have heightened sensitivity. It's not perfect here, but it shows that witnesses do have different things that help them remember and not remember.
Absolutely.
And even in my own lawsuit where my wife sued the state of New York, and we're waiting for a decision about an accident where her and I were involved in, and it was, you know, a bad accident and on motorcycles. And I remember everything clearly, but then time goes by. I'm like, did I remember that? Or, you know, fortunately, I wrote everything down. To my first point, I wrote everything down the morning we got home from the emergency room, wrote it all down. And so now I look back, I'm like, well, if I wrote it, that's what it was. But if you ask me to remember it now, I don't know.
Well,
right?
And that's because of the way that our brains work and the way we store and process things, because what you're talking about is the original memory of something superimposed on your thoughts about something, superimposed upon you reading about something, maybe watching a video about something, hearing someone else tell the story about how it happened. All of those things can alter your memory. And that whole biological process that takes place, you superimpose that on a law like this. And good Lord, I mean,
60 years later,
it's crazy. Our memories just aren't that good. And that's why we have a statute of limitations. And for the legislature, with the best of intentions, with the absolute best of intentions, to enact a law like this is just crazy, crazy.
But that's what we got. And so now, you know, it's good for my firm. It's bad for fire departments, but it's, you know, it's bad for everybody, including victims. You know who this is good for? It's the lawyers who are.
It can't be good for victims because they just keep rehashing it and rehashing it and rehashing it. But
the lawyers are going to make a ton of money on this, ton of money. And, you know, anyway.